Brother Winfield and I are in Schulenburg, Texas, and this is May 2016. We've had a great weekend. Brothers and sisters have all been here, 7 of us. Peggy, Fanny, Winfield, Scott, Ruth, John, and Peter, and spouses. Great time. We've told stories, we've watched video, and our event for the weekend was to put a plaque out at the Sterling Cemetery. Winfield had put it together, and so we enjoyed watching them work. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. The cemetery is in a gorgeous pecan orchard, and the birds entertained us, and we spent a lot of time there this weekend. Ending with showers and rain, perfect for pecans. Winfield wanted to hear some stories about Aunt Augusta. Now I'm the oldest child, and oh my goodness, at 82, I still have lots and lots of memories of Aunt Augusta and living down the orchard from Aunt Augusta and Grandma Sterling. I spent the night at Aunt Augusta's house for a number of years in a row. First with Dorothy Lee. Dorothy Lee and I would go down through the orchard path from our little house to Grandma's and Aunt Augusta's house. And we had a double bed out on the porch, and that's where we would sleep. In the morning, Aunt Augusta would get us up, and we'd get ready for school and brush our teeth, and she would braid our hair and feed us a huge breakfast, and we would go on to the bus. In the afternoon, we'd come home, and my chores generally were to go ahead and gather the eggs. Aunt Augusta had lots of chickens. She sold eggs, so we gathered eggs and tried to avoid the black snake that was always in the hen house, and clean the eggs, because you couldn't sell a dirty egg, so you had to clean the eggs. And so that was part of growing up life. The best thing on Wednesdays was we'd come home from school and go to Aunt Augusta's, and she would have homemade bread. The week was very organized for Aunt Augusta. On Mondays, she did the laundry. That was a big thing, because when you did the laundry, you had to build a fire and boil the big wash tub, which was a black kettle, and she would boil her tea towels, and everything had to be immaculately clean. And then they would go into the wash tub, which was a wooden tub that had a handle on it to go ahead and wash the clothes, a manual wringer to wring them out. And then you had to redo all of that by rinsing the clothes with bluing, so the clothes were absolutely white. But it was a big chore. So Monday was wash day, Tuesday was ironing, and Wednesday was baking. And Aunt Augusta would bake these beautiful loaves of bread in a very small kitchen. The stove that she used was a kerosene stove. It had 3 burners, and one of those burners had a small portable oven. And that little oven, she could set the temperature, and she could go ahead and put all those loaves of bread in that tiny little oven and bake bread. But she had to do it in a sequence to get them baked, because she baked bread once a week. But when we came home from school on Wednesday, we got a slice of warm, hot bread with homemade butter and jam. Oh my gosh, it was the best thing in the world. And I remember it to this day, the smell of the kitchen. But I couldn't ever get over it. Now I cannot get over how her space planning was, because she had a little pantry. She had flour that was in I don't know, maybe it was a barrel, a tin barrel, and it must have held maybe 50 pounds of flour. It was big. And she had sugar in another barrel, smaller. But she had to do everything on a very small table in the kitchen. That was, she had to use it to do her prep work for cooking. And then she had to wash dishes after a meal. And she would have a kettle of water on the kerosene stove. And in that kettle, the water was boiling, boiling. She'd wash the dishes, and then she would stack them in the big pan and pour boiling water over them. So everything was done very systematically. Aunt Augusta was very, very organized. She got this from her mother. I remember watching Grandma Sterling make noodles, and she did it so fast and so immaculately. I said, oh my gosh, this is where Aunt Augusta gets all of her direction, because the noodles were all the same size, and egg noodles were a whip for her to make. But it was just so fun to watch them do things because they did perfect work. The potato was peeled just perfectly. There wasn't anything but the peel left. She didn't take any of the white off of the potato. She did the same thing with tomatoes. To watch her peel a tomato, and we never ate the skin of a tomato. It had to be peeled just so. And it was such a kick for me to remember those things. So that was the style that I created for myself. If you're going to do it, you do it right the first time. So it's a pain for some people to watch me do things. No, I do it this way, and this is the way I do it. Because of Aunt Augusta and Grandma, I'm sure. But watching Aunt Augusta go ahead and make butter was always a kick. We made butter at home, but we were not nearly as scientific as Aunt Augusta was. She had all the right tools, and she would churn the butter, and then she would take her wooden spatula, and she would knead that butter and scrape all of the buttermilk out of it. There wasn't a drop left. Add salt, and she kept kneading it, and then she would put it in the wooden 1-pound butter mold, and it came out perfectly every time. There were no air pockets in it anywhere. So watching her do that, she was very specific. She would get her papers in her box material for the butter at the creamery, at Golden Jersey Creamery in Edinburg. And then she would lay the paper out, put the butter in exactly the center, and fold the paper around it, and then slide it into the box. And she would stack those in her refrigerator, and those she would sell at her back door. People would knock on her back door, and she would sell a dozen eggs. She'd sell a pound of butter. She never sold bread. The bread was for the family. But she really saved her income. Aunt Augusta was also very religious. We went to Sunday school every Sunday, church every Sunday. For Sunday school, she gave a nickel. Every Sunday, she gave a nickel. To the church, she gave 35 cents every Sunday. I don't know how often that would change, but that's what I saw recorded in her paperwork. When she balanced her checkbook, she also took all the change out of her purse to go ahead and add the change to all of her assets. It was miraculous. She was just so precise. And so she did her books exactly the same way that she did everything else. She sewed our clothes. When she bought those big sacks of flour at the grocery store, she would take us with her sometimes, and we got to choose the sack that we wanted our next dress in or our next pajamas. And we'd come home from school and it would be made. And I can't remember what day of the week she would have sewed. I don't know if she ironed and sewed on the same day because I really didn't witness too much of her daily activity because I was mostly at school. But her routine was to get up in the mornings and she would be dressed. Fanny and I talked about it. I said, you know, I never saw her at a time when she wasn't dressed. I never saw her in pajamas. I saw her in a nightgown at night sometimes. But the house was immaculate. The kitchen was immaculate. Aunt Augusta was immaculate. I said, how in the world did she do that? There was no bathroom. There was no bathtub or shower. So they bathed out of a wash basin. But they were always clean. After we got off to school, pretty much, Aunt Augusta would be down at the barn, and she would be milking the cows because the Golden Jersey Creamery would be coming by to pick up the milk. And so Aunt Augusta milked the cows twice a day, and the milk was picked up by Golden Jersey, and that was her income. So she sold eggs and butter and milk and cream, and that was her income. She was very proud to pay her taxes on the land, to take care of Grandma. And I think of all of this, and I think she was a nurse too, because when Grandma was older, she broke her hip and lived for 15 years in a wheelchair. And Aunt Augusta physically had to lift her and carry her to her bed at night. And then later it was intensive care for her. But when it was intensive care for Grandma, we had already moved. And so she wasn't taking care of 2 or 3 kids and Grandma too. But it was pretty amazing what she accomplished. And in such a tiny, tiny, small space. I always wanted to know, where did she change clothes? Because Grandma was in the small bedroom. There was one little closet in the bedroom, no other closet. There was no storage space. So how did she do it? How did she arrange her life? And how could she be so immaculate and so neat when there was such little space? It gives us an image of what we could do. And that's why we could fit in a motorhome or a little RV, because if she could do it, by gosh, maybe I could too. But anyway, our lives it was amazing how our lives were improved or changed because of Aunt Augusta. She taught us structure. I'd come home from school, and in the 3rd grade, I needed to learn the multiplication tables. So she fixed cards and did all the multiplication tables, and she worked with me until I learned all of them. And I was the first one in class to learn all the multiplication tables. And we were doing this with a kerosene lamp on the table, giving us some light. And she said, you know, I was valedictorian of my class. If you want to be valedictorian, you can be. And she said, I can help you do that. And I didn't know as a 3rd grader what a valedictorian was, but I listened. I didn't ask. But I soon learned what it was. And but she really did help me become disciplined with doing homework and getting things done. If you do things in an orderly manner, they all get done. So Aunt Augusta helped order my life as a child. And so that's kind of my story of Aunt Augusta.
Maybe you can explain, Peggy, why you had to live there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had to live there really because the house was so full of children. We had a one-bedroom, living room, kitchen, and kind of a half bath and a closet in our house. And Mom and Dad had babies, and then they had another baby until there were 9 children. And there just wasn't room for all of us. And to go to Aunt Augusta's and spend the night, it was just a walk through the orchard. So we would leave our house before dark and get down to Aunt Augusta's. We didn't eat supper there. We would eat at home, and then we'd go to Grandma's and Aunt Augusta's and spend the night. And it would either be Dorothy Lee or Peggy and Fanny. And so I didn't do that when I was little. When I was little, I was at home. Little being, probably 6 years old. I probably didn't go down there and spend the night until I started school. And but I remember Dorothy needed to be at home to help take care of kids and help cook and help Mom. And so I could go, and Dorothy stayed home to help Mom. So I was always kind of expendable, so I could go, and I must have spent the night at Grandma's and Augusta's house for more than 6 years, I would think. So I really learned a lot from Aunt Augusta, but Mom had her hands full at home, that is for sure.
Well, all the guys lived in a little white bunkhouse out behind our family home. And so when you girls came back to the house to sleep, where did you sleep?
Yeah, when I never slept at home.
No, really?
No, I never
slept out in the living room?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
And I wasn't there, so I don't know where everybody slept. I know that when Fanny was born, I was so young. I was just over a year old, maybe 15, 14 months old when Fanny was born. And I was very, very healthy, very, very active. Nothing was ever wrong with me, but Fanny was allergic to milk. She was not so well. She would have colic, and so Mom had to take lots of care of Fanny. And then you were born, and they had 5 children. So they had 5 kids at home, and then it was, 5 years before Scott was born. And so she had a little bit of respite there. By the time Scott was born, Dorothy was already, 10 years old. And so she could really help take care of Scott. So Scott was Dorothy's first baby, and she was very protective of Scott. Nobody changed Scott's diaper but Dorothy. So yeah, it was a lot of fun growing up with brothers and sisters.
Maybe you could explain the special relationship that Aunt Augusta and Bruce had.
Oh my gosh. It was combative. Yeah, Bruce liked to do things like irritate the heck out of Aunt Augusta. That was made his day. Bruce would throw rotten oranges, especially if he could find rotten oranges on the ground, at Aunt Augusta. Oh, it made her so angry. And milking the cow, oh my gosh, Bruce would also just irritate Aunt Augusta to pieces because he liked to go ahead and squirt milk to feed the cats. And the cats would stand up and lap up this milk. And so Bruce is wasting time and the income by wasting all that milk. He would drown these red ants. So funny, that Bruce, he was just such a terrible influence. I learned to run really fast to outrun Bruce. I learned the back bend because Bruce would take my braids and turn me over backwards till my head hit the ground. And so I learned to do the back bend really well because I wasn't going to give in to Bruce. And I don't know where that came from because I wasn't combative really, but I would combat Bruce. He just brought that out in us somehow. But, oh, he loved to irritate Aunt Augusta.
Well, that's probably, it's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough on Aunt Augusta. But Peggy, your memory is just outstanding. You're just a treasure to the family, and I really appreciate you doing this.
It's
And maybe, if you think of more things, we can do
do it
another
again.
little video.
Okay, all right.
Thanks a lot.
Well, it's a pleasure.